All right, Dan. Looks like we're live here, the Saratoga podcast.
Yes, we are. I had a little bit of a delay on my end, but welcome everybody. Welcome Saratoga Springs and beyond to the Saratoga podcast, episode number 59. I'm here with my good friend Adam Israel, a co-host on this. Our third co-host, Robin Dalton, has a personal commitment today. She cannot join us. Adam, how are you doing? You're outside.
Yeah, I'm outside. We're on a little family vacation, so there's a lot of people staying in a small cabin. So I'm actually at a relative's cabin on the front porch here. So if the wind picks up, I apologize. I'm muting the mic, but I think we got a great show today. We have our Commissioner of Public Safety, Jim Montagnino, on, who's going to be addressing the march down Broadway by the number of Proud Boys. Dan, did you see that?
I only saw it online, of course. I didn't happen to be downtown on Sunday. Kind of shocking and appalling, kind of out of the blue, right? Then they went down to Ballston Spa, apparently to Waterford as well. I'll mention something about Ballston Spa later in this. And that, of course, Saratoga being Saratoga, that created a political incident, I guess you could say, or a political action, which we're going to talk to Commissioner Montagnino about. And he, as Commissioner of Public Safety, is tasked with a lot of things about this, because there were, yes, you can, First Amendment rights, but there are still, when it calls to a parade and so forth, you still need permits, and he'll touch on that. And Adam, your direct knowledge of it, you didn't happen to be downtown Sunday, did you?
No, I was out of town, but I caught someone on social media, but also about the political part, and something we'll talk to Commissioner Montagnino about. The mayor, again, demanded a report, which is, some may argue, is in his purview as a mayor under the charter. Some may say this is outside of it. We'll ask Commissioner Montagnino about that. But he demanded a report, and him and Commissioner Dylan Moran seemed to imply that I think the police either knew about it or should have known about it. And Commissioner Montagnino, replied back that the counts department handles permitting these operations. So we're here to try to break it all down. And I think, Dan, we should bring on the good commissioner to give us an update about what exactly happened and what was the city's response.
Yes, let me bring him in here. Commissioner Montagnino, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Oh, thanks for having me very much, Dan.
Hey, Adam and I were talking. There's the incident, and you heard us talking. You were backstage. There's the incident, then there's some politics involved, and maybe some administrative functions involved. But they all a lot going on here, and we want to bring you on to both explain the investigation portion of it, and then maybe a few minutes down the road.
Can we start, Dan? Can I jump in? Professor Montagnino, we've known you to be a very detail-oriented guy, a very informed gentleman. So what exactly did happen? Can you give us a breakdown of the actual march? Were they blocking traffic? About how many? About what time? And so on?
Well, in terms of the specifics, it came out of the blue. There was no advance notice given to the city at all. In terms of our department learning of it, there was a call from a private citizen to our 9/11 dispatchers saying that there was something going on Broadway. And one of our sergeants immediately responded to the scene. And the entire incident, I believe, took somewhat less than maybe 10 minutes. They apparently appeared on Broadway. They got out of a number of cars. There was one yellow pickup truck that was part of their procession. They walked down Broadway for a bit. When the sergeant arrived, he walked up to the person who seemed to be leading the group and had a conversation with that individual, asked them what they were doing. The person said that the group was the Proud Boys and that they were marching to bring back law and order, and that they were just finishing their demonstration and they were moving on to another city, but didn't say what city. So they climbed into their vehicles and drove off. The sergeant followed them for a bit to see what direction they were headed, alerted through dispatch the county law enforcement as well as state law enforcement to let them know what had just happened and what the stated intentions of the group had been and the direction of their travel, so that other authorities could be alerted ahead of time. And that was basically it. There were no disturbances other than the presence of the people who walked down the street. Nobody reported any injuries, no property damage, and nothing of the sort.
Was there anything verbal going back and forth, perhaps between citizens downtown and the group?
I heard from some of the people that I spoke to that there were some comments passed back and forth between people in the neighborhood who were troubled that this particular group chose to march in Saratoga. There were some words exchanged. I don't believe, from what I heard from the individuals I spoke to, that there was anything particularly offensive by either side, and not very much of that in terms of the quantity of it.
Right. And Adam, did you? You're muted, Adam. I'll just ask him, kind of restate your question from earlier, or segue now, Commissioner, if you could, for us. We, as you know, there were a couple articles. Your report that you submitted quickly Monday night, and you indicated that there may have been a violation of the city code. Could you expand on that, and where, to the extent that that is an ongoing investigation, where that is intended to head to?
Sure. Well, the mayor issued there was a press release, but independent of the press release, the mayor sent me a request under 3H of the city charter for a report on the incident. And that I received somewhere around 1:30 or so Monday afternoon. He asked that I have the report in by the close of business Thursday, but in light of the importance of the matter, I felt that it was something where Deputy Titu and I would drop what we were doing and get on it so that there would be a written report done as soon as possible. And we stayed after hours a little bit and had the report completed by, I think, about 6:20, 6:30, something like that. We went and got copies of the police reports that were generated from the incident. I know that the lieutenant was reviewing there was some surveillance footage on a pole camera. There was dash camera footage from a police vehicle that responded to the scene. Those have already been burned to disk and have been provided to various members of the press pursuant to FOIL requests that went out pretty shortly thereafter. And as I prepared the report, responded to the mayor's questions, and basically the only offense that I could see that was clear, the fact that there was what by definition under the city code is a parade, had taken place without a permit. And the code's pretty clear as to what a parade is, and this, I'm fairly confident, qualified as a parade. And under the code, there's a requirement of a minimum of 30 days in advance, a request for a permit. And in addition, there needs to be a certificate of insurance provided to the city so that the city knows that if there are any liabilities flowing from the parade, that the city will be indemnified for that. And my understanding is that there never was any permit application filed, no permit provided. And other than that, the code, there's another code provision for demonstrations which don't require a permit but require notice to the city. Demonstration, though, is defined as having more than 25 participants. And I don't know, I haven't sat and looked at every inch of footage and tried to identify who's part of the parade and who's just walking down the street, but I don't know that there were enough people for it to qualify as a demonstration. But the fact that they were actually marching down Broadway and did cross at least one street, I think it fits the definition of parade more clearly than demonstration. And so there should have been a permit application. Apparently there wasn't. There should have been a certificate of insurance filed with the city. There wasn't.
And Commissioner, you alluded to this, or you probably said it pretty much in the Gazette article and others. This is not an easy task to come up with arrests here. You had people covered with masks, several people. it's an ordinance. You got to worry about selective enforcement. I mean, it's very possible that this, at least from a investigation police department standpoint, as far as prosecuting somebody for a petty offense, it very well could go nowhere. Would that be a correct assessment?
Well, that certainly is a possibility because, yes, they were wearing face coverings, which I should mention the code provision that deals with parades prohibits face coverings. But first of all, the language of the ordinance is a little strange. It talks about face coverings from the chin to the forehead. And that provision's an old provision, and my belief is that it's related to a provision in the penal law that was written many years ago with the Ku Klux Klan specifically in mind. That, as you know, their face coverings are complete. They wear full hoods. Obviously, we're in a post-COVID world, and it would be sort of difficult to say that our city ordinances prohibit wearing a mask in a public place. From what I saw, the facial coverings that the participants had were not full face. It wasn't from chin to forehead. It was kind of a cloth face covering that many people wore during the pandemic. So it would be difficult, certainly, to prosecute that particular offense. But I think, Dan, what you're alluding to is the difficulty of identifying specific individuals. I know we do have one license plate number from a vehicle that was part of the procession, so we're able to identify the owner of that vehicle. So it might be possible with some further investigation to identify one or more of the participants.
Jim, let me ask you, because this gray zone of free speech versus violating city code or law has been something that Saratoga has been the challenge Saratoga has been facing for years now. With an incident like this, you're going to have people in the moderate, like myself, and the left say, "Listen, this is a despicable group who tried to overthrow our government." They other municipalities have used the fact that they've used violence to advance their positions in the past to stop a group like the Proud Boys from marching. You also have people on the far right say, look at what the BLM protesters, they block streets and block cars for hours. Not hours, pardon me. That's no, but they, their demonstrations or parades were significantly more disruptive than this one. Why, where does the line fall for you, or as a commissioner, do you leave it up to, say, the commissioner of accounts to offer Commissioner Moran's the one who is in charge of issuing the permits for these kind of events. Do you have a feeling on where that line is with free speech versus the need to follow law?
Well, it's an excellent question, Adam. And you're aware, and so is Dan, that I've been an attorney for 35 years, and I was a prosecutor, I was a defense attorney, and I worked in the judiciary for 26 years. So I'm somewhat familiar with the subject matter. I don't pretend to be a constitutional expert, but certainly I'm aware of the fact that the First Amendment is number one for a reason, that political speech is carefully protected, as well as the right of free association is carefully protected. I'm also aware that reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions on the exercise of First Amendment rights are constitutionally permissible. So I am certain that there is no infirmity in the cities requiring a permit and prior notice to an event like this. But I think the question that does come up, and you alluded to it, Adam, is the question of whether there's selective enforcement. That yes, there are groups who have demonstrated and marched in our city on a regular basis on a number of recurring events, who have not filed permit applications and so haven't had permits. So that's a separate question. The question of what would be the repercussions of prosecuting this group or members of this group for violating the city ordinance when others may not have been prosecuted for it. And so certainly this has caused us to do a lot of thinking here at City Hall, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more conversation in the near future. But I think that we will need to sit down and come up with a coherent and equitable strategy for dealing fairly with anyone who wishes to exercise their First Amendment rights, but are required by the city ordinance to follow certain rules at a time.
Do you feel that's something the other commissioners and the mayor would be open to as the governing body of the city, as a group sitting down and kind of coming up with, like you said, a guideline or rules to follow when approving permits or when enforcing laws for these groups that choose to come to our downtown area and march and disrupt traffic and operations?
Yeah, well, I think there certainly needs to be the conversation. As I indicated in my report to the mayor, we would go forward with the prosecution. Now, I have to asterisk that, right? This is a violation of the city. This would be an allegation of a violation of city ordinance. From what I can see, there are no penal law offenses that were committed. So what that means is the prosecuting authority would be the city attorney and not the district attorney. So the city attorney is in the mayor's department under our form of government. And in addition, since this is a quasi-criminal offense that would follow the criminal procedure law in its prosecution, we would need the commissioner of accounts to sign the supporting deposition, because he would be the person with direct knowledge of whether an application had or had not been filed for the permit. So as a practical matter, for the matter to proceed to prosecution would require the cooperation of 3 of the 5 members of the city council, because of the interplay of public safety, the mayor's department through the city attorney, and the accounts department.
Can I take that with a segue right there? Because you talk about the cooperation. Adam, I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off if you needed to
No,
follow
I'm done, Dan. On to you.
Okay, it's a perfect segue here, because you mentioned cooperation, city council. And my take on it is, the 3 of us on this screen right here, as well as Robin, and so many of us watching and so forth, I won't speak for the world, but are disgusted by what that group stands for, the bigotry, the hatred, so much more. So if ever there was a time for the city council to stand together, it was, Sunday afternoon into the weekdays this week. And yet what my take is, and I've been critical of you in the past, but it seems like they took this as an opportunity to, let's attack Commissioner Montagnino and use this to tighten the screws against him and point fingers at him. Is that where you're at in your head? Do you not want to talk about that? Or it just seems like it was an unfair attack at the very time that we need the city council to stand together and strong?
You raised some very good questions, Dan, and I appreciate the opportunity to address them at a little bit of length. This is, as you say, this is a serious matter. This is a group that has been involved. As we know, a number of their members have already been sentenced to significant prison time for what happened on January 6th of 2021. I remember watching the video of that as it unfolded that day, and it looked to me like our federal government was in jeopardy of almost collapse at that. For some hours, it looked like the darkest days for our country. Certainly the darkest days that I've lived through, with the possible exception of 9/11 itself. So we need to be serious about the response that we make to what happened over the weekend. And it's important for us to act together. And as I mentioned in my report, and as I've said to you, I'm fully prepared to move forward with this, and it will require the cooperation of the city council to do that. Now, having said that, I received a copy of the press release that was issued by the mayor's office, and was troubled because the press release itself begins with Mayor Kim announces actions by city council. I wasn't on notice of any actions by the city council. The press release has quotes from 3 of the 5 members of the city council. I wasn't aware that 3 of the members had discussed this among themselves. And I don't know the circumstances of that conversation. We're all certainly aware of the open meetings law and what the ramifications of that are. And I don't even want to go down that road as to how this occurred. You make a good point that the press release certainly has some quotes in it that look like they're intended as I'll say a personal attack, as though somehow I was asleep at the switch because of this incident, when we now know, because there's been a lot of coverage of it, there was no prior notice to the city. And as soon as the Department of Public Safety was notified of the situation, dispatch sent a sergeant there who responded, took a report, interviewed people, alerted other authorities of the fact that the group was an impromptu demonstration that intended to move to other places. So we did everything we could under the circumstances. And since there were no obvious penal law offenses being committed, there were no arrests made, and there was no attempt at impeding individuals in what they were doing for the day. And as you see, I followed through with the mayor's request. He asked for a report by the close of business Thursday. I had it for him a few hours later. So it's clear that I'm serious.
I have to ask you, have you spoken to the mayor or Commissioner Moran either through text, telephone, or directly since this occurred Sunday?
No, we haven't had a conversation about this. I've met with the mayor. In fact, we were at a meeting on the homeless, the temporary homeless shelter on Adelphi Street. We were at that meeting yesterday evening, but this wasn't a topic of our conversation.
So no conversations or communications at all amongst you or anyone else on this. As a citizen standpoint, I say, boy, that's terrible that they're all communicating via press release. And again, I pointed out you were the one that was being attacked here. I think that as a citizen, I demand better, something this serious, that it's all maneuverings and political attacks and so forth. That they all need to do better. And in fairness to them, perhaps if you could do this over Sunday, I get the feeling that they were upset that they weren't notified by you, and I don't know that. Maybe I'm reading into it. If that's true, I think that's legitimate, right? On something important, the other, the city council should be talking to each other. Hey, this just occurred. I'm on it. Boom, boom, boom. This is all I know. Perhaps there's I'm trying to give fairness to everybody I can here, and when they're wrong, they're wrong. I'll point it out in my opinion, and it's just Dan's opinion. But when you're right, I'll point it out as well. Is that fair? That perhaps you could have given them the city council a call at some point Sunday, said, "Here's what I got."
Well, here's the thing, Dan. I didn't know about the incident until the following day. The incident occurred on a Saturday, and
on Saturday, I thought it was Sunday.
I wasn't aware of it until I was contacted by the press, and then I called Deputy T2, who had been in contact with some people on Saturday. So I wasn't even aware of it until 24 hours after the event itself had occurred.
So none of the other commissioners called you and said, "Hey, Jim, what the hell happened yesterday?" That didn't occur?
No, that didn't.
Shame.
And I think a point that I'd like to make is one of the reasons I did my written report in the time frame that I did was so that there would be communication with the rest of the city council. I sent it to all the council members and all the deputies as soon as I possibly could, so that the public could have a record of the communications. The communications are in writing, and the impression that I wanted to leave was that A, I do take this matter very seriously. B, it was over and done with long before I had any notice of its having happened, and indeed the city itself had no notice of its happening until it was almost over. The whole thing was about a 10-minute event. And again, no crimes were committed, and so there would be no reason for anyone to have been arrested or impeded at the time.
If I can end this on a positive note here. Robin Dalton texted Adam and I and said, maybe other people know about this, but this is the first I heard about it from Robin. There's a rally this Sunday to stand against, I'm quoting her text here, not on our watch, a rally to stand against the Proud Boys marching in our community. We are better than this. This Sunday, August 13th at 2 p.m. at the downtown post office. Bring signs celebrating diversity, acceptance, democracy, all the good things. Of course, that begs the question: is a permit needed? But I'll leave that go for now. But
well, she better get more than 25 people. It sounds like, huh?
I'm sorry.
It sounds like that 25 people cutoff's a big cutoff between a parade and a demonstration. Technically speaking.
Yeah.
I'm not making a situation. It's a very interesting little kind of sidebar that.
No, it's a very good point, Adam. I'm sorry. I apologize for talking over. I didn't mean to do that. Now, it's a very good point, Adam. And the code the parade doesn't kick in from what you're saying, because it sounds like this is going to be by the post office. If you're not marching, if you're not impeding the flow of traffic, then it's not a parade. This would follow the code's definition of a demonstration.
Got it.
The code doesn't require a permit, but the code, I'm looking at it right now. It requires notice. It says the filing of a declaration. So the requirements for something like a certificate of insurance or the 30-day notice requirement in a parade wouldn't be part and parcel of just a demonstration. So it kind of sounds like if this is being made public, that de facto the city will be on notice of the fact that a demonstration.
Yeah, and I just like to end with and this is a little conservative of me coming out, but what we see at the national level with the far right, I think what we see in Saratoga is we see city business being impeded by the far left in our city. We see the streets and cars being blocked for longer than 10 minutes by the far left in our city. So I would hope, if nothing, I'm not justifying anything that happened with this group, because I do think the Proud Boys are a despicable group, but that we do kind of a unified code where, regardless of your own politics, First Amendment rights are protected within reason and equitable spread among groups, regardless of their political affiliation. So I wish you the best and luck, and hopefully that comes out of all this.
Yeah, no, thank you, Adam. And I agree with what you just said 100%. Yeah. We need to be even-handed and fair in the way we handle these kinds of situations.
Commissioner, we on behalf of both of us, thank you for coming on with us today. Please, if you could find a way, and I will, if the others, council members are watching as well, we need 5 people together on this issue to address this, so we stand unified. So thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the time and the opportunity.
Take care.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dan.
All right. Well, that was interesting, Dan. Don't you think?
Yeah, Adam, I'm having a little bit of trouble here. I did remove him. His screen froze, but I don't know if he's still with it. Anyway, and I have to say here, because I made some commentary on what I see going on with the city council. Anyone that's watched this podcast for a while know I've been very critical of Commissioner Montagnino in the past. I've even mocked him on this podcast. I'm a supporter of his opponent in the election. One of his opponents, Tim Cole. And so the fact that I'm pointing out that he was wrong here, I think that should be significant to people. That at least 2 of the council members, the mayor and Commissioner Moran, simply use this as an opportunity to attack one of their political opponents when they should have done the right thing and stood together.
Yeah, well, maybe we could get one of them. I know Commissioner Moran has come on the show before. Mayor Kim has too, but I would love to hear their side of it, what they thought could be done differently, and their input about because these issues are affecting our city, right? So, Commissioner Moran, hopefully you're watching. If you are, come on, or Mayor Kim, you as well. But Dan, you certainly do call it as you see it without putting a a bias on it, and I think that's why people like watching you. So.
Well, thanks. Yeah, Commissioner Moran and Mayor, if you're watching, you have an open invitation for next week. Adam, I'm going to ask to do kind of a significant shift here, and this is, what we're talking about is very serious. Do a little bit of shift to some horse racing issues. And when we bring up horse racing issues on this podcast, it's not about who's in the stakes race on Saturday. It's about how horse racing is, in many ways, the backbone of the county's economy and perhaps the capital region's economy, how things in horse racing directly affect Saratoga Springs, whether you're a fan of horse racing or not. So when we talk about horse racing, that is why we do it. And we have a special guest here today. I'm going to bring him on and introduce him here to talk to us about two different aspects of significant occurrences in horse racing.
Two big events. I'm looking forward to getting his input on it.
One example, Bill Godimer is an attorney. He's a horse owner. He's held just about every job in horse racing, including as a groom back in the day. He's a Saratoga Springs resident most of the year, and he happens to be a good friend. We did a horse racing podcast last year for several weeks, actually into earlier this year, about horse racing with a Saratoga focus. Bill Godimer is the attorney that represented Katie Davis and her husband when some gaming rules prohibited them from racing unless they were a coupled entry, which was absurd. And Bill's such a good attorney, he was able to get that rule changed. Bill, thank you for joining us today. And how are you doing?
Well, thank you for the kind words. I guess we're here to talk about the events of last weekend and this early this week, and kind of a dichotomy, one quite tragic and maybe one hopeful. Last weekend at Saratoga Racecourse was, by any estimation, among the darkest weekends the racecourse has ever had. It began with a sudden weather change on Friday that resulted in the balance of the card, a third of the card being canceled summarily. It was followed Saturday by a beautiful day and a large, happy crowd to view good racing, and the tragic breakdown of Maple Leaf Mel strides from the wire in front of everybody, just pretty much horrified the entire racing community and viewers on a nationwide audience. And then was followed Sunday by another fatality on the race course and the cancellation of all races on the grass for the day, resulting in a significant change to bettors and a lot of criticism to the New York Racing Association. So it really was a confluence of events that really cast the game in a bad light from almost every angle. From an animal's right perspective, from a predictability standpoint, from a gambling perspective. It's really a set of days that the industry wishes they could erase from existence. I believe that one of the things that's new recently is that horse racing is now subject to both state and federal regulation. And I write about this a little bit in the upcoming article I'll have on Friday in my column in Saratoga Today. But regulators tend to be reluctant to act or move slowly, but when they do, they tend to do so bluntly. And I hope that's not the case here, because Saratoga, Saratoga Racecourse is the centerpiece of this town for much of its history, and it was a particularly bad set of days.
Can I interject real quick? As far as the regulation goes, is there any regulation that you think could have prevented these tragedies that you would like to see done differently? And is there any regulation that you said, that I think all government entities have that kind of act that way, where as a business guy, I always said you want to regulate yourself before the government comes in and regulates for you, because they're going to overshoot. So is there anything any regulation you think that would help that's reasonable? And is there any regulation you're scared of?
Well, I mean, there's two separate things right here. So we'll speak about the most important part here, the animal safety part of it. And that is something where the sport has constantly claimed that they would self-regulate and has constantly been unable to do so. So that, that horse has left the barn, so to speak, to use a bad phrase. The federal government does in fact now regulate horse racing. That has happened. So, the federal government now has the ability to regulate, which includes the ability to outlaw. And they will have to answer to that. And there's a number of protocols that are now been put in place regarding medication of horses, regarding pre-race inspections, and most notably in this instance, post-mortem necropsies after a horse has had a fatal accident, like people did on Saturday. So yes, I mean, the short answer is if horse racing exists by a social license granted to it by government fiat, and if the game doesn't police itself, somebody else will, and that could include some pretty draconian measures. That's certainly the answer on the animal rights portion, or the animal safety portion. I mean, anyone who thinks that things can't be regulated or outlawed just has to speak to the circus, which no longer has animals, and SeaWorld, which no longer has live entertainment. So that is something the industry has to be extremely careful about, and it's not just from the standpoint of people who generally against animal activities. This is now coming from pretty significant people. Now, that being said, horse racing is a game that has its risks, and it's not as uncommon as you would think. It's a sport where athletes and both equine and human are exerting quite a bit of effort, and they can be fragile at times. As far as the second portion, which is what had the gamblers upset last week, which was regulations regarding canceling races and changing the surface upon which racing has run, it has gotten way too complicated, and it's almost beyond regulating by the New York State Gaming Commission, which has particular rules. I think power needs to be put in the hands of the stewards or the racetracks to make common sense decisions about refunds or about changing conditions when safety requires it. I believe New York Racing Association felt their hands were tied, that when they changed the whole races from the grass course to the dirt course, they would have liked to have issued refunds. I think they've stated now that they felt they were unable to do so under New York State Gaming Commission regulations, and there wasn't enough time to get a ruling on it. And that's something that can be easily corrected. I mean, there is something for strict regulations, but there is also something for common sense ability of the racetracks to make their decisions.
So for the if I can break it down for the horse fans out there, and tell me if I'm right in this. So if you have a pick six, meaning you're picking the winner of 6 races in a row, and you won the first 3, and let's say the last 3 are supposed to be on the turf, and you pick horses that you think run well on the turf, when the races are taken off the turfs and put on the dirt, you're saying they should probably just get a refund instead of having to stick with those horses and keep their money in the bet. Is that correct?
Partially correct. This was, yes, there are protocols and there are rules when that happens midway in a pick 5 or a pick 6, a multi-race wager. The problem with this happened that it happened short. The change in surface was announced very shortly before the beginning of the race, the series of races. So at that point, they would have liked to have declared a refund, and frankly, to use the vernacular, no bet, get everyone get a refund and just cancel the bet. They felt hampered by New York State regulations that required them to follow the protocol, even though none of the races had yet been run. So I mean, this is in the weeds here. They've apologized profusely about it as recently in the last hour, and have said they'll somehow try to make it up to gamblers. But I feel for them in that instance, because it's a question of safety. You know, you can't run on an unsafe course. Weather up here is particularly unpredictable. It always has been, but this year they've run into a particularly bad spate of volatile weather. And you know, safety comes first. You know, with that, a series of races spread over a 4-hour period, it's difficult, if not impossible, to guarantee that the weather will be cooperative. So I mean, that's something that I think can and should be handled by the New York State Gaming Commission, giving the racetracks latitude to do what they feel is necessary for their customers.
And Bill, I assume your Friday article in Saratoga Today will cover some of these topics we're talking about here?
It will, and it will highlight that despite the fact that the game was viewed in a poor light this weekend, many people in the game, or vast majority of people in the game, have dedicated their lives to the welfare and benefit of these athletes, these equine athletes. And I think that has to be remembered when looking at it either internally or from afar.
Oh, good. Adam, if you could tee up the next issue, because I know on your What's Going On Saratoga Facebook page, you have a brand new picture there of pretty exciting. We are going to take a shift here, still within horse racing, but this is exciting. And again, even if you're not a horse fan, folks, share the excitement a little bit because it benefits Saratoga. Adam, you want to ask Bill?
Well, we'll get into it. There's no real taxes paid. We can talk about that. I don't know if Phil's in tonight, but $4 million for a 2-year-old horse that's never run a race before. Am I correct?
Well, correct. Followed shortly thereafter by another purchase from another horse for $3.2 million. So last night was quite the night at the Facing Tipton sales.
Do you know how that stacks up against previous? I mean, were records? I know they tally for the night. They tally for individual horses. Was this a record-setting night? Do you know?
Well, it was not a record-setting night for the Saratoga Facing Tipton Saratoga sale. I think it's the third or fourth most high purchase. But it's dwarfed by some purchases at the Keeneland sales in other years where 13 million comes to mind. There was one for 12 million. There's a horse called the Green Monkey who was infamous for going for a very high price and not having a particular amount of talent. This horse had, wonderful lineage, and it was purchased by the people who owned Medina Spirit, who was involved in the controversy with Bob Baffert over the last few years regarding the Kentucky Derby.
Bill, sorry to cut you off. You were there. Can you, when you're finished at the sun, can you share the excitement in the room as this got 4 million and the other got 3.2?
Well, anyone who's been to the sales realizes there's an inside and outside portion of it, and it's quite festive. Last night, when this hip number 165, which is a colt by Curlin out of Champion Beholder, which is why it went for so much money, there was great anticipation that horse would be a very high price. So people did fill the gallery. Unfortunately, people made noise in the gallery, again, treating it more festive than probably was safe. It did upset the horse somewhat, but the handlers did a wonderful job of calming things. But yes, there was a palpable excitement leading up to it, during it, and afterwards. I mean,
that's great. It's good to celebrate something. Go ahead,
you
Adam.
touched on it, but again, for the non-horse racing fans, what makes a horse, again, a 2-year-old horse that's never run a race, so valuable? Is it how fast it's run as a juvenile horse? Is it its lineage, its mom, dad? What makes a horse that valuable?
Well, I mean,
that much of a risk.
I mean, there's an old adage that says in this game, you breed the best to the best and hope for the best, and that's what you had here. You had a proven sire from a dam who was a champion herself, and in her first 3 falls had at least an early stakes winner, and so certainly it's all about pedigree and about confirmation, which is you can't see on a paper. You see that physically looking at the horse's conformation and makeup.
And real quick, does the horse have a name? And can we expect? Do you think it would ever run at Saratoga? When? If so, when?
the horse does not have a name. It'll probably be named shortly. The horse will be with Bob Baffert in California, at least initially. So it's unlikely that the horse will run in New York as a 2-year-old. But again, it's just speculative. Many high priced yearlings do not work out. But that's kind of what the fun is about. I mean,
it's a very rich man's gambling way to gamble, I guess.
Yes, I mean, it's in some ways, and it's this is the top of the top. Dan, one instance that your listeners may be interested in finding out is one of the higher horses that went ever was a horse called Tom Thumb, and he was purchased against the advice by Sigmund Sommer, against the advice of his trainer, and he purchased it at a high auction price. And the reason he did so was because his trainer left the room to watch the televised announcement that Richard Nixon was resigning. So that's back then you didn't have instantaneous communication, and a president resigning was big enough that most people left the auditorium, and while he was not taking the advice of his trainer Frank Martin, Sigmund Sommer bid a lot of money on Tom Thumb and Tom Swift, Tom Swift, and was a pretty well-known bust as far as an expensive purchase.
That was going to be my follow-up question. You answered it. Bill, hey, thank you for joining us here today and giving us some of that insight. Folks, again, every Friday, Bill Gadamer, attorney, horse owner, he knows everybody on the backstretch, trust me. And look for his article this Friday and every Friday, at least during track season. I think you do it in the off season, but maybe not every week, Bill. Is that correct?
I would do it, yeah, sporadically in the off season, but once a week during the season.
Excellent. Adam, anything? For
no, just I really appreciate the insight from somebody who knows the industry like you do, Bill. So thanks for coming on, and hopefully we can maybe get you on one more time before the end of the season. But if not, we'll look for your article in the Saratoga Today weekly publication. What is it? Saratoga Today? What do they publish weekly? Don't they, Dan?
Yes, Friday.
Yeah, Friday. Got
Thursday
it.
night, I guess. Excellent. Yeah. Okay, Bill. Hey, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you, Bill.
Thanks. Great, Adam. Hey, I think these were the two topics that you and I wanted to discuss today. We kept it brief, folks. Robin should be back with us next week. Adam, do you want to do anything with cheers and jeers or comments?
No, I appreciate Commissioner Montagnino coming on. We'd love to get Commissioner Moran or the mayor on here to kind of give us some insight, not to necessarily get into the weeds with the Commissioner of Public Safety, but to give their thoughts on what the city should do in this gray zone between First Amendment and the dangers of political speech. So if anybody's listening who wants to come on, reach out to us. But if not, Dan, I think it was a really informative show. I certainly learned a lot.
And these are serious topics. One limited to an economic thing, but that's important to Saratoga. People's livelihoods depend on the horse racing industry. And then obviously the first topic we discussed. Quickly, Adam, I've got one cheer, and I don't even know the woman's name, but the owner of Sage Wine and Spirits in Ballston Spa, 55 Front Street in Ballston Spa. She went out and confronted the protesters when they moved on to Ballston Spa. And they tried attacking her via Google reviews and so forth. And as I understand, she's getting, she posted on your website or somebody posted on her behalf on what's going on Saratoga Facebook page, Adam. And people are coming in, and I'm going to get down there today. I don't even need a bottle of wine, but I'm going to buy her a bottle of wine for doing the right thing. She stood up, and it had to be a bit intimidating, right? It's one person against how many? I don't know how physical it got, or if it got physical at all. But the fact is, that took guts, that took integrity. I shame on me for not getting her name, but Sage Wine and Spirits, folks. If you want to support somebody that stood up to these bigots, go there and buy some things and like her on Facebook and so forth. So I think that's just a positive ending to a negative story.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, Dan, I guess we will, hopefully the summer's a little spotty, but we'll see you next week.
Okay, excellent. Next week, folks. Take care.
Get to the beach, Dan. Enjoy.
Thanks. Bye-bye.